Hello and welcome to Veg Around the World with me, Meenakshi Garodia. In this show, we explore one country at a time through its vegetarian cuisine. The country we've chosen today is Switzerland. Now, everybody knows about Switzerland, right? We know about the Swiss Alps, about Swiss chocolates, about Swiss cheese. But as a country, Switzerland's very interesting. It actually did not participate in either World War I or World War II. They believe in armed neutrality. They also have 4 languages inside the country. The 4 languages are French, German, Italian, and Romansh. I'm just going to talk about Romansh. But what's interesting about Switzerland is each of the part of the population that speaks a certain language sort of identify with that country. Their cuisine is like that, their culture is like that. But Switzerland is a very united country, and what unites them is democracy and economy. They are some of the richest people in the world, one of the highest per capita GDP, one of the highest lifestyles and quality of life. So a group of people decided that we might be different ethnically, but we're going to be together because this is the best way to be. I think it's amazing. Now, coming back to Romansh, that was a very interesting language. It is actually derived from Vulgar Latin, which is the layman's Latin and was spoken in the Roman Empire. And I think it's pretty much the only area in the world that it's spoken. And they have like Romansh medium schools, like we have English medium schools or like French medium schools. So that's pretty interesting too. And in Switzerland, the food, to come to the food, there are 2 dishes which are considered sort of like the national dishes. One is cheese fondue. Everybody's heard of cheese fondue. And the other is Rosti. Now, talking about cheese fondue a little bit, it's really interesting how it came about. So Switzerland has the Alps, and you have a lot of sheep, and therefore you have a lot of shepherds. And the shepherds would very often have to hike overnight or multiple nights to find grass, because you have scarce grass in high altitudes. But they would carry their cheese, their wine, and some stale bread. And what you do with that, you combine the wine and cheese over some fire, and you dip your bread and eat it, and that's how fondue came about. Rosti is basically a potato pancake. Now again, almost in every culture that you have potatoes, you have some sort of potato dish in which it's either a pancake or fried, basically potato and fat. And this is actually this comes from the German part of Switzerland. It's really interesting because they say that there's a line between the German and the French, and that's called like the Rosti dish, because the German side has Rosti and the French side does not have Rosti. So we're going to make Rosti, we're going to make cheese fondue, and we're going to make chocolate fondue. I'm going to start with the Rosti. So for the Rosti, we're going to take 4 potatoes and we're going to peel them. Rosti is, as I said, it's from the German part, and it used to be something that they ate at all times, but now they still eat it at all times actually. They eat it for breakfast, and you can have it plain or you can have it with toppings. If you have it plain, normally you just use salt and pepper. But with toppings, and actually I'm going to do a bunch of toppings because I love toppings with it. If you have it for breakfast, normally you have it with a fried egg sunny side up, or you have it with spinach. The toppings I'm going to do is going to be like sour cream and chives. I'm going to have 1 slice which is just plain, 1 slice with sour cream and chives, 1 slice with sauteed onions, and 1 slice with sauteed shiitake mushrooms. So I've just peeled these potatoes. Now, there are 2 ways you can make Rosti. Traditionally, when you have a dish which has been around for like 400, 500 years, there are of course many different ways of making them, and they're all the right way to make them. A lot of people swear by parboiling your potatoes, and then you freeze them for a day, and then you grate them by hand, and then you do it. Again, I like tasty food, but I don't want to be like it to be super, super involved. So I tried both, and this tastes pretty good to me. So I'm just going to slice this. Also, about grating, you can of course grate by hand, but if you have a food processor, I would recommend using it. It just takes maybe like 10 seconds to grate all these potatoes, while by hand it would take at least 10-15 minutes. And I prefer exercising in the gym, so I'm going to go ahead and food process this. It was as easy as that. I'm going to discard these little extra pieces. And I'm going to take this out in a bowl and be right back. I'm just going to start. So I got a cast iron skillet for this. I like the shape. You can make Rosti in small individual cakes or one big one. I like making a big one and slicing it. So I'm going to put this on high because it's a cast iron skillet. It will actually heat up evenly. What's good about using metal utensils like copper or iron is actually you get some copper or iron in your food, and that's extremely healthy for you. I'm using it because I just love it. Okay, so this is on. Now for this potato, what you do is you sprinkle a little bit of salt. So just like a little bit of salt, you work it in. And then we need to squeeze out all the excessive water. The best way of doing that actually is with paper towels. So I'm going to just take 1, 2, 3 paper towels. You can use a clean cloth too if you're more environmentally friendly and you have a clean cloth. The last thing you want is like a dirty cloth in this. It's going to make your food taste like that. Dirty dish rag. And you squeeze it out. Did you guys ever read that fairy tale about the giant and the boy? And he tricked him. He squeezed a piece of cheese and got milk out of it, while the giant squeezed rock and got water out of it. I think that's about it for me. I'm not that strong. And you put it back out. The paper towel's torn too. A cloth is much better actually. You'll probably be able to get a lot more water out. But the good thing about using a paper towel is you don't really need to clean it. You just discard it. Okay, this is good. Okay, this is not hot yet. So while we're going to wait for this to get really hot, let me tell you about the toppings. So we're going to do just plain sour cream. And we're going to use this sour cream with some chives. Let me chop some chives. I had washed these. And we're going to use some onions. You can use as much as you want. These are just finely chopped. And some shiitake mushrooms. Now, I find in mushrooms, the type of mushroom makes a very big difference to the taste. I mean, that's a bit like duh. Of course, the different mushrooms taste differently, but shiitake are some of my favorite. I've sometimes used rehydrated ones too because they're a good option to have, especially for stock. That's good. I don't need more. So this is nice and hot now. So what we're going to do is add a tablespoon of butter to it. Rosti is essentially potato. You can use whatever fat you want. I like butter. There. That sizzle of the butter in a pan is so amazing. I just love it. And it just smells so good. It's so tasty. So when you take this, there are different ways of doing it. Like some people make pancakes. I like it a little fluffy and crispy. So I sort of sprinkle it. So you sprinkle it all around. And then you take your spatula and you sort of try to make it a little round. Now we want the inside of the potatoes which are inside the middle to cook too. So we're going to turn this on to low and we're going to cover it. Now skillets normally don't come with cover, so use whatever you get. And I'm going to set a timer for maybe like 5 minutes and see whether it's done there so that I don't forget about it. So the cheese fondue we're making today is actually a champagne and shallot cheese fondue. In that we use champagne, shallots, which are like something in between garlics and onions. This is 1 shallot cut up. We're going to use 3 types of cheese. We have Gruyere, which is, they're Swiss cheeses essentially. This is 2 cups of Gruyere. This is 1 1/3 cup of Emmentaler. And we're actually going to use, this is unusual, a little bit of camembert. We're going to use like a 1/3 cup. Also, if you look at it, the biggest quantity of cheese is of the least flavorful, and the smallest quantity is of the most flavorful. Because you don't want, there's a lot of cheese in each bite, so you don't want it to be too strongly flavored. It doesn't taste nice then. So what you do first is you combine the shallot, which is one finely minced shallot, with around a cup of champagne. So I have a champagne, of course, has to come from France. That's one of the that's the only type that can be called champagne. You could use sparkling wine too, but I just went with champagne here. I have a little trick for opening champagne, which I'm going to share with you today. So it's possible it won't work today because this bottle's been shaken around a little bit. You can't have your bottle shaking around. We went to the Champagne district in France one time, and we went into Tattingier's cellars. It's amazing. So the trick to opening champagne and not having it blow up is you hold the cork and you move the bottle. And I have another trick, which is using these shelf liners. I cut them up, and you can use them for anything, like a jar that doesn't open or whatever. It doesn't look very glamorous to open champagne like this, but this is for cooking. It's not for drinking. Your champagne shouldn't be cold. Earlier, because I wanted to drink while I was cooking, I used to use cold champagne, and I've cracked 2 ceramic pots like that. Here goes. See, perfect. So we're going to pour around 1 cup. Ooh. Another cup. And actually, this wasn't a complete cup, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 3rd one. You should start off, most ceramic pots can be put on the flame, but start off with it on low. Yeah? We're going to leave this. Meanwhile, we're going to take some lemon and cornstarch. So surprisingly, cornstarch was introduced to the fondue maybe 100 years ago. It's important because what it does is it sort of like emulsifies it together. It makes sure that the cheese and the wine don't separate out. So we need around a tablespoon of, and I'm going to just, and you're going to put 3 teaspoons of cornstarch in it. You don't want to put too much cornstarch, and you don't want to put too little. Now, mixing cornstarch is kind of strange. It feels like cement. It feels really thick and gooey, and it's very messy. Now, once the champagne or your pot has gotten a little bit warm, you can make it hotter. And I actually went ahead and bought a fondue set which says it cannot crack under any circumstances. Now, also for the toppings for this, we're going to have potatoes, cornichons, baguette obviously, and baby carrots. So what I do is I buy these small potatoes, and then I'm going to fill it with a little water and boil it for maybe like 4 minutes. The potatoes should be done just right in 4 minutes. I'm also, like baby carrots, you don't really need to cook, but when you're having it with cheese fondue, it feels a little bit too stiff. So I'm going to cook it maybe just for a minute so it gets a little bit tender. Now, I think the Rosti is done. Now what we're going to do is you need to flip it. Now, if you try to flip it, it's going to just break. So what you do is you wear gloves, lift it, ooh, put this on top, and actually flip it. Okay. Can you see how perfect that is? You put this down. Put another tablespoon of butter. Ooh. And then we slide this back. Make sure it's nicely evenly all around. We're going to cover this just for a minute, because if you cover it at this stage, this side will get a little bit soggy, because covering also sort of retains the moisture and the steam, and that's what actually cooks the inside. But because it's going to be on this for a while, we can cover it for a little bit. Okay, and this is getting heated up. So now that the shallot is getting a little hot in the champagne, we are going to go ahead and add all the cheeses. So actually I haven't prepped the camembert yet. I'm just going to. So you need to cut the rind, because in the end you want a really smooth fondue. So I'm just going to open this out. This is normally a bit more graceful. We need half a cup. So given that this is a cup, around this much. So if you're at home and you want to eat it, just take a slice of bread and put this peel on it, because camembert peel is very tasty. And you can just put it under the broiler for a minute. It is very good. You could put some tomatoes on it if you wanted. I can pretty much live on cheese, and it is not the healthiest things for you, but I've reached the stage now when I have a good cheese, I don't want to adulterate it with bread or crackers. It has to be just as is. So you go ahead and you add all the cheeses into your fondue pot. I like using silicone spatulas for these things because they're easy to clean up. Give it a good stir. And we're going to add the cornstarch mixture at this point. It solidifies a bit, so you to sort of rub it in. I wonder whether they use this while making Play-Doh. It looks like something they should use. What we're also going to do is add just a pinch of nutmeg. I prefer using a pinch for a pinch. And a pinch of white pepper. Okay, I'll be liberal with my pinch of white pepper. I'm partial to pepper. And our cheese fondue is pretty much done. We're just going to wait for it to melt, and then we're going to dip lots of yummy things in it. So the things we're going to dip are, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to dip some cornichons, we're going to dip some baguette. So I'm going to clean this up and start, actually this is easily cleaned up. I'm going to start slicing the baguette. Now when you're slicing baguette, it's important to have the crust in every bite, because otherwise what happens is you can have a very soft piece of bread which when you dip gets stayed behind, and that is not acceptable in Swiss culture. If you drop your first piece of bread, if you drop a piece of bread, then for the guy he's supposed to buy a round of drinks for everybody, and for the woman she's supposed to kiss her neighbors. My exposure to fondue actually started with these French comics called Asterix. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but in the Asterix comics, it's about these Gauls who held out against the Roman Empire through some superhuman strength-giving potion. But they go to Switzerland and they have fondue there. And it's this big cauldron full of cheese. And the rules there are the first time you lose a piece, you get hit by a stick. The second time by the whip. And third time you have weights tied to your feet and you get thrown off. And the visualization is everybody's covered in cheese. And in India, we only got like one type of cheese when I was growing up. So I was very deprived. And it was just like, it sounded like a dream come true. And so then inspired by that, after I was 18, I decided to try, in India the legal drinking age is 18, I decided to try making fondue. And I didn't really have access to alcohol, so somebody got some port wine from somewhere, and we took that one type of cheese and cream cheese and added the three together. And it was pretty nasty. I think I would never eat it today, but that time we were like so thrilled we're eating fondue. So you can see this looking really good. I'm going to add a little more champagne to this. I want it to be a little more liquidy. So I cut up this bread. Now you can use stale bread. Actually, stale bread is better because it's a bit harder. And they're pretty much like 1-inch cubes. And as you can see, this cheese fondue looks perfect. I'm going to transfer it onto the fondue heat now because we don't need this. And the Rosti is done too. So I'm going to dish out the Rosti, which is a little involved because again, it's the really fancy stuff where you put the plate on top and you take it out. I like to do it like that to make sure that the other side is nicely done in case I need to put it back on. Woo, look at this, it's perfect. So I'm going to put this aside. And be careful with an iron skillet because this is hot now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to saute some onions and some mushrooms separately in butter. Again, you have very small portions of Rosti, at least you're supposed to have very small portions, so it's okay to use the butter. That's a bit much, even by my standards. Okay. And I'm just going to add these onions. Ooh, there's nothing quite like onions in butter. I'm also going to get the fondue pot. Now typically you get fondue thing. I'm going to get a match and be right back. So you can control the heat by how much air you give it. And this part is actually to shut it off. So right now, to start with, I'm going to make sure that it's fully open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put this back in the waiting area. And this is handleable. I'm going to put this on top. And keep it on a bit low because this cheese fondue is quite well done. If you feel that it's getting a bit dry, just add a little more champagne. Okay, the cheese fondue is done. Let's get the other things ready. Let me check on the potatoes. Oh, they're nowhere near done. I'm going to do this for another 2 minutes. And the bread's done. We're going to put a little water. Let's take out the cornichons. Just a little spillage here and there. I'm going to take out a few of these cornichons. This tastes very nice. This is basically a fancy way of saying pickled baby cucumbers French style. I'm just going to take out a few of these on the plate. And we're going to set up for, let me check on the onions. Yeah, I don't want it pinker than this. Can you see this change in the onion color? It looks so pretty. I'm going to put it back in the little container it came in. Yeah. Add a little butter, the other half tablespoon that I decided not to use that time. Maybe a little bit more for the mushrooms. Oh, I forgot to sprinkle salt. It's important to sprinkle a little bit of salt in this because the onions taste slightly off if they don't have salt. Even though the potatoes themselves have some salt, but you need each topping to be flavored by itself. Now, this was just to show you what a shiitake look like. I normally don't use the stems unless I'm making stock. This is, you know, nowadays in all the utensils you have like the non-heated handles, so one has such a temptation, but it would be horrible. Can you imagine? Everything would be burned. I think the potatoes are finally done. They'd better be. That looks pretty good. Yeah, they are done. So I'm going to take out a bunch of potatoes. I'm going to put the carrots in the microwave. And this is literally for a minute. Because, you know, you just want them to be slightly less crunchy but still fresh. This is the fondue pot I have for chocolate, and I've put in a heat thing beneath it. One of those things you can get. So if you don't have a fondue pot, you don't need one. Go and get one of these things. Oh, that's hot now. Okay, this part is fine. One of these things from the hardware. Take any ceramic pot and you're good to go. You don't, and fondue is great, you know. One of my favorite memories is I used to have a fireplace and we would sit in front of the fireplace and have fondue on a cold winter's night. It's such a social event because all of you are eating the same food, and it's wine and it's chocolate and it's cheese and it's delicious. So for chocolate fondue, now I have all these little tricks for chocolate, right? So it's so easy you won't believe it. I like dark chocolate, especially when you're dipping stuff. I don't want it to be too sweet. So you take a cup. So this is a 1/3 cup measure. I'm going to take 3 of these. 1. Again, it can be approximate because you can play around with the things. 2 and 3. For the fondue, essentially when you melt chocolate, it becomes thick, but it's a bit too thick for dipping. So if you wanted to make chocolate covered strawberries, in that case just melt your chocolate and use that. But if you're making fondue and you want it to sort of stay liquid for a while and not be a bit, I mean, just liquid chocolate is a bit too heavy, what you do is you take an equal amount of cream. And you put it in the microwave. As usual, you need to make sure there's no water around it. So you might have to do a bit more depending upon your microwave. No, see? You just keep whisking this. I have this cute little whisk. And it's just going to melt perfectly. You can have it just like this, or you can add any flavors you want to it, or you can add just a little bit of alcohol, just a little bit. I'm going to add some Cointreau, like a capful maybe. I like the flavor it gives. You'd think a capful is not that much, but you can really taste it and you can smell it more than that. So this is on fire, I mean, the fire thingy is on fire. You just pour it in. And you let it bubble. Now the things we're going to do to eat, dip in it, is strawberries, just peeled and cut. A banana. You don't want the pieces to be too thin and your banana to be too ripe, because it's just going to fall into the chocolate otherwise. Some pretzels. I like the whole thing of sweet and salty, and I prefer these old-fashioned salty pretzels to the sticks, because double dipping is not acceptable. This way we can just dip the whole thing in it and go. Very good. Oops. Normally I make my cake, but you want to get some pound cake with this. It tastes very good. It'll pretty much be like chocolate with icing. Again, you want to make sure that your pieces aren't too small. I like the way that looks. So I'm just going to set out everything and be right back. So the only thing left to do is decorate our Rosti with its toppings. So I'm going to actually quarter it. What's that term? You draw and quarter. So that was a bit gory. This is not so gory. Yeah. One portion I'm going to leave plain. One portion I'm going to put a little bit of sour cream. Not too much. And sprinkle some chives on it. One portion I'm going to put some onions. One portion I'm going to put some mushrooms. And our food is ready. So I'm going to start with the Rosti. I'm going to sample the food because I just love it. So adding the salt in the beginning makes it taste just right. If you don't have enough salt in potato, it can taste bland. Onion and potatoes are always paired well. I was saving the best for last with the sour cream and chives. And the easiest one to make, actually. It's really good. Now, fondue is normally eaten with forks like this or this. The difference is this one, normally very often they come color coded, so each person knows what color they are. Now my favorite way to eat it is with bread. I fork it through the hard side, unless it's too hard, then I don't. You give it a good swirl. You get this crust at the bottom of the cheese, and frankly that's one of my favorite things to eat. Like, I sort of wait for the fondue to get over to eat the crust underneath. This is really good. And now I have to try the chocolate fondue, of course. I decided to have some contour with my meal. Normally you have wine. Swiss wines are actually very good, and Swiss wines, they have very strong rules about exporting Swiss wines. They don't make it easy to take Swiss wines out, but some of them are so tasty. So I'm going to start with strawberries. This is a bite full, but the good thing is the strawberry is healthy. The strawberries are really tart and chocolate's really sweet. It matches very well. As you can see, This was an easy meal. It's a complete meal. It's perfect for a cold winter day. And I hope you try it at home, and bon appetit.